Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. Today we deal with two very unpopular topics, radioactive waste and reality. One is physically toxic, the other is mentally uncomfortable. Naturally, politics prefers to ignore both. That's where serious players step in, quietly building infrastructure for the next 60 to 100 years while the rest of the world argues about slogans and wind farms. We'll look at three connected stories. 1. How Rosatom, Belarus and Kazakhstan are building a full nuclear backend instead of just shiny power units. 2. Why green energy loves to talk about kilowatts and hates to talk about garbage. 3. How a small region like Abkhazia shows that in the energy world, you either plan long-term or pay for someone else's planning. No flags, no moral hysterics, just structures. So what actually happened? Rosatom and the National Nuclear Center of Kazakhstan signed a memorandum. Not about another power unit, not about PR, but about the least glamorous part of the industry, radioactive waste, spent fuel, decommissioning, and contaminated land. The scope is very clear. Safe management of radioactive waste, handling of spent nuclear fuel, decommissioning of nuclear and radiation hazardous facilities, rehabilitation of contaminated territories, and returning them to economic use. In normal human language, they are not only planning how to build nuclear facilities, but also how to bury, dismantle, and clean up after them decades ahead. This isn't Kazakhstan starting from zero. Russia already ran a similar program with Belarus. A national radioactive waste operator was created, mirroring the Russian national operator. Together, they are building near-surface disposal sites for low and intermediate level waste. They are training specialists who will actually run these facilities when the glamorous part is over and only barrels and documentation remain. It's not spectacular. No one does victory parades with shoe covers and contaminated overalls. But this is where the difference appears between an energy policy and a PR campaign. There is a basic, slightly depressing rule. Every power system produces waste. In nuclear, even the most routine things become waste. Work clothes, gloves, masks, covers, tools, filters, rags. Those famous plastic shoe covers they give journalists on plant tours, all of that becomes low-level radioactive waste and needs proper handling and controlled disposal. You cannot just throw it into a landfill and hope gravity is a shield. The Soviet system understood that and built the radon network, specialized enterprises that collected radioactive waste from medicine, research, industry, and mining. It was supposed to be a temporary solution until proper disposal sites were built. Somehow, despite the joyful chaos of the 1990s, the system survived now. Russia has a network of near-surface disposal facilities. The most dangerous sites, especially those related to weapons and fuel production, are being dealt with first. The same template is now exported to Belarus and prepared for Kazakhstan. This is what backend really means. Not a line in a strategy document, but concrete, steel, licensing, monitoring, and people who know what they're doing. Front-end nuclear PR usually stops at clean electricity. Back-end begins where fuel leaves the reactor core. Typical model for Belarus and potentially for others. Spent fuel is cooled in spent fuel pools at the plant. Then it is sent to Russia for reprocessing. Only the small fraction that cannot be reused today comes back as high-level waste, roughly 2% of the original mass. The real headache is not the volume, but the half-life. Long-lived minor actinides like neptunium, americium, curium, they stay dangerous for hundreds of thousands of years. 5 half-lives to decay to safe levels turns into over 1 million years. Try designing a man-made structure that must remain stable for 1.5 million years. That's not engineering, that's geology plus religion. This is why fast reactors and transmutation are not academic toys. In fast neutron reactors, sodium or lead-cooled, you can burn these long-lived isotopes. Their half-life drops from hundreds of thousands of years to hundreds of years. Suddenly, you don't need a mythological eternal repository. You need a technically serious but realistic 100-year confinement system. Projects like BN 600, BN 800, BREST 300 are part of this logic. Move from bury and pray for 1 million years to burn, shorten lifetime, store for a few centuries. It's still difficult, but it becomes an engineering problem, not a geological curse. Now compare this with the so-called green transition, wind turbines, lifetime 15 to 25 years. After that, massive composite blades that are very hard to recycle. Current solutions, cut them up, bury them, or use them as decorative fences in the middle of nowhere. Solar panels, silicon wafers, rare metals, toxic layers. Recycling technologies exist in theory, but full cycle, mass scale processing is still in progress. Economics are often quietly ignored because it would make cheap green power look less cheap. There are no full mandatory recycling chains for composite blades in most countries, no large-scale industrial system for decommissioning entire offshore wind farms, very little public discussion about who pays for dismantling and disposal when the subsidies end and the metal rusts. The main task right now is to sell the fairy tale. Green is cheap, green is clean, don't ask what happens in 20 years. Nuclear, with all its problems, at least has the intellectual honesty to factor in. Decommissioning costs, long-term waste management, legal, technical, and financial responsibility for the next 60 to 80 years. Naturally, for this honesty, nuclear is called too expensive, while no one calculates the full bill for dismantling a generation of offshore wind farms in the North Sea. Give it time. The graveyards of cheap green are already visible. For Kazakhstan, the stakes are very simple. It is one of the key suppliers of uranium to the world. It wants its own nuclear power and fuel cycle, not just the role of resource appendix. It has serious legacy issues, from test sites like Semipalatinsk to environmental risks around water bodies like Lake Balkhash. Starting back-end planning now in parallel with site surveys for future power plants is not bureaucracy. It is survival instinct. Assess groundwater, seismicity, geology for disposal sites now, not when drums are already piling up. Embed spent fuel and waste rules into national legislation early. Train specialists long before the first unit reaches the end of life. In Belarus, the model is already functioning. EAS VVER 120 units designed for 60 years of operation plus possible 20-year extension. From day one, there is a plan how to shut down, dismantle, and turn the site into brownfield, industrial reuse, or, in the ideal case, greenfield, residential, or clean land. This is what a strategy actually looks like, not a PDF with 2030 vision, but an institutional chain that will still be working when everyone who signed the memorandum is long gone. Now switch to Abkhazia and the Inguri hydroelectric system. Tiny region, huge lesson. The Inguri HPP complex is an engineering monster. High dam, large reservoir in the mountains. The reservoir is under Georgian control. The main station is on Abkhaz territory. Politically, the region is, let's say, complicated. Yet, in 1997, an agreement was reached. 60% of the generated electricity goes to Georgia, 40% goes to Abkhazia, and for decades this formula has been respected despite wars, frozen conflicts, and mutual accusations. Why? Because you can shout about geopolitics as much as you like, but if you cut power in the mountains, everybody's refrigerators stop at the same time. Energy systems are mercilessly practical. Problems in Abkhazia are classic. Tariffs are politically kept low. Networks are old. Losses through power lines reach around 40%. Demand has grown sharply. Tourism, consumption, illegal loads, including crypto mining at one point. In dry years, the reservoir drops and output falls to zero. Result: Russia has to send humanitarian electricity at its own cost. Russian southern grid is not in infinite surplus. It has its own bottlenecks. Georgia and Azerbaijan, through agreements with Inter-RAO, keep reserve capacity to support the wider region during heat waves or deficits. No ideology, just interdependence. You either maintain infrastructure, invest in it, plan for droughts and peaks, or you pay higher prices and lose control. Exactly the same logic applies to nuclear, wind, solar, pipelines, grids. The map doesn't care what you think about your neighbors. It cares whether electrons have a path. Rosatom's deals with Belarus and Kazakhstan are not about Russian greatness or Russian evil. They are about something far more boring and more serious. Who in Eurasia is willing to think in full cycles, from fuel production to waste burial and site restoration? At the same time, the fashionable green transition still lives in a teenager mindset. We'll install turbines and panels. It'll be fine. Don't ask about recycling. Our electricity is cheap, and the cost of dismantling we'll calculate later or never. Kazakhstan's choice to build backend strategy during the planning stage, not in a panic at the end, is the difference between being a subject of energy policy or its raw material. Abkhazia and Inguri show the other side. If you don't invest in your system for years, you end up dependent on whoever kept theirs in working order. In energy, as in politics, there is one simple rule. Those who think in decades quietly rule those who live in election cycles. Thank you for watching. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones, and try to remember, slogans don't power grids, systems do.